Hello, and welcome to your NBA stock report for the week of March 21st. I'm Tim Bontemps, NBA reporter for ESPN. And here's what's trending up and down around the association, beginning with the streaking Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, that is not something we've been able to say very often about the Timberwolves over the course of their history, particularly when Kevin Garnett has not been on the team. Pretty remarkable stat. In all of the years that Kevin Garnett has not been a Timberwolf, somewhere over 20 seasons, they have made the playoffs exactly one time. And that was when they lost in the first round a few years ago in Jimmy Butler's lone full season in Minnesota. So obviously a star-crossed franchise for many reasons, but it looks like that streak is going to end this year as the Minnesota Timberwolves find themselves tied with the Denver Nuggets for sixth in the West after their recent surge of wins. They've now won 9 of their last 10. They're the hottest team in the NBA, certainly outside of Boston, who we'll get to in a bit. And it's been a really fun season for the Wolves. Anthony Edwards, we've talked about before, one of my favorite players in the league. Certainly a great quote. Very fun guy to watch play. He and Karl Towns have powered a really fun offense in Minnesota under Chris Finch in his first full season as a head coach. He's done a remarkable job there. And the Wolves are a team that are peaking at the right time. They're playing great down the stretch. They've taken advantage of a soft stretch of their schedule, and now it is going to get tougher this week, beginning with 2 games against the Dallas Mavericks on Monday and Friday, a team they are 2 games behind for 5th place in the West. So suddenly you could be talking about the Wolves not just getting out of the play-in tournament, potentially getting up into the 4-5 matchup in the West, which is simply not something we would have been saying a few weeks ago when they were down, clearly in the middle of the play-in mix and just trying to get home games in that tournament. So really great turnaround for the Wolves. Great season for them. It's going to be fascinating to see if they can push this to the finish line and get into that top 6. But certainly for a team that's not had a lot to be excited about the past few years, you have to be feeling pretty good if you're a Minnesota Timberwolves fan about the direction of this team with Chris Finch coaching them, with Karl Towns and Anthony Edwards together on the court. A lot to be excited about, which is not something I've been able to say a lot in my time covering the NBA about the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now let's go to another team in a cold weather market, another team that finds themselves streaking, the Toronto Raptors. I'm in Philadelphia doing the stock report after Toronto's big win over the Sixers on Sunday night. And look, obviously, Friday night's loss to the Lakers was a rough one, blowing a lead down the stretch, going into overtime, eventually losing that game. Certainly one that the Raptors would like to have back against a struggling Lakers squad. But look, they come back and win tonight with Fred VanVleet in street clothes, with OG Anunoby in street clothes, beat a fully healthy, ready to go Philadelphia 76ers team on their home court in a potential first-round playoff matchup. And the Raptors have now won 6 of their last 7 games. They've gone 17-8 in their last 25 games, with only the Celtics, who we're going to get to in a minute, as the only team in the East with more wins than them over that 25-game stretch. And Toronto is going to be a very, very tough out in the playoffs if they can get their guys healthy by the time the playoffs roll around here in a few weeks. They've got all these 6'8", 6'9", long, athletic guys. Nick Nurse is not afraid to try different things. We've seen that at times in the playoffs in the past. He's very comfortable throwing out crazy looks that teams have not seen before. He certainly got the Sixers a little discombobulated today after a rough first quarter for the Raptors defensively when they gave up 37 points to the Sixers. They basically shut them down the rest of the game. So really impressive win tonight for Toronto, really impressive stretch for them. And this is going to be a big week. We're going to talk about the Bulls a little bit later on. The Raptors, Cavs, and Bulls in a huge fight for 5th, 6th, and 7th in the Eastern Conference. The Raptors, 2 losses behind those 2 teams. They play them in their next 2 games. A back-to-back in Chicago. Monday night, a game Fred VanVleet is going to play after sitting out Sunday night. And then a game after 2 days off against the Cavs on Thursday. Raptors win those 2 games. They got to feel pretty good about getting up to 5th in the East. And again, they're certainly not going to be a team that I think anybody's going to want to face in the first round of the playoffs with the way they're playing and the way they can really wreak havoc on teams with their very unique style of play. And finally, we've got to talk about the Celtics, and instead of talking about the Celtics as a team, we're going to talk about the play of Jayson Tatum in particular. Now, look, we've talked a lot about the Celtics turning their season around since beating the Wizards in Washington on January 23rd, the start of their now 21-4 stretch over the last 25 games. Well, over those 25 games, not surprisingly, Jayson Tatum has been awesome. Here are his numbers. 29.7 points per game, 7.6 rebounds per game, 5 assists per game, shooting 49.7% from the field, 40.3% from three, 87.9% from the line. So nearly a 50, 40, 90 pace while averaging nearly 30 points a game, 7 rebounds a game, 5 assists a game. Those are MVP caliber numbers. Tatum has been phenomenal. The Celtics look like a legitimate championship level team, which is frankly unbelievable when you look back to where that team was when they lost that Wizards game and they were sitting at 500 and their season was going nowhere. It has been an incredible turnaround in Boston, and it's really been it's been a big part of their success has been the play of Jayson Tatum taking a big leap and going back to being the guy that he was towards the end of last season and not the one who was struggling with his jumper for the first few months of this year. Now, certainly anybody who's seen Jayson Tatum play in the past would have expected him to get it going at some point. He has in a big way. And again, the Celtics look like they could beat anybody in the league right now. They're outscoring teams by 16 points per 100 possessions. They have over those last 25 games, they are 5 points per 100 possessions better than anybody in the league on defense. They've been the best team in the league for 2 months, and you have to look at them as a legitimate title threat, which again, where they were for the first 50 games of the season, it is an unbelievable turnaround. But at this point, you have to just say that it's a real one with the way they've been playing. Now let's shift to the stock down portion of the stock report for this week. And we've got to start with the Golden State Warriors. Obviously, they've been struggling, have dropped 8 of 10. On top of that, Steph Curry gets into an awkward collision with Marcus Smart the other day, is out for at least a couple of weeks with a foot sprain. And look, clearly the number one thing for the Warriors is for Steph and Curry to be healthy come playoff time. But look, this is a team that was hoping to be getting the second seed in the East, or in the West, I should say, and getting home court advantage in that what looked like it was going to be a titanic second-round series with the Memphis Grizzlies. Well, now we could be looking at a situation where the Warriors, now just 4 games up on 4th in the West, or on 5th in the West, I should say, could be looking at a situation where they're not having home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs, and they're stuck in a much tougher first-round matchup than they would have predicted a couple of weeks ago. They do have a bit of a soft schedule here down the stretch, a bunch of teams they can beat. But that being said, with no Steph Curry on the court, this team is going to really struggle to score. They obviously had a tough loss on Sunday night to the San Antonio Spurs, and this thing is probably going to get worse before it gets better for the Warriors with Steph and Curry not coming back soon. And it's going to be fascinating to see where they wind up because obviously the only thing that matters is Curry being healthy. And if he gets back by the time the playoffs start, they're going to think they can beat anybody. But a team that has been at the top of the West all season, all of a sudden might find themselves smack in the middle of the playoff picture in the West, and that could really discombobulate things from where they look like they were going to be a couple weeks ago to where they could be in a couple weeks when the regular season ends. Now let's shift to another team that's dropped into the middle of the pack. We talked about them a little bit before, and that's the Chicago Bulls. Now the Bulls have had some unfortunate injury luck. Obviously no Patrick Williams basically all season. Alex Caruso was going to be probably on my Defensive Player of the Year ballot before he got hurt. Lonzo Ball was a huge part of their success. He's missed a bunch of time with a knee injury. That being said, the Bulls, since their high water mark of 26-10 back in early January, they're 15-19 over the last 34 games. They are 25th in the league in defense over that stretch, and they've gone from being in a fight for first place in the East and being in first place in the East for much of the season to now, as we talked about earlier, being a half game up on the Cavs, 1.5 games up on the Raptors, 1 loss up on the Cavs, 2 losses up on the Raptors, with games against Toronto on Monday and against Cleveland later this week on tap. And if the Bulls want to get out of the first round and have a chance to, have the playoff run that they hope they were going to have, first things first is going to be getting their guys back healthy. They hope to get Lonzo Ball back by the end of the regular season. Patrick Williams should be back very soon, which should certainly help the Bulls, giving them some size on the wing and at the 4 spot in particular. That being said, if they drop these games to Cleveland and Chicago, or to Toronto, I should say, they're going to be looking at a real possibility of being in the play-in tournament and possibly playing the Brooklyn Nets in the first game of the play-in tournament. And then all of a sudden, you would expect that Chicago is going to be hosting the 8-9 game, just hoping to make the playoffs, which is certainly not where the Bulls thought they were going to be when this season began. So, it's been a very good season for the Bulls so far. They've played really well. DeMar DeRozan has looked like an MVP candidate at times. And again, they've had some very unfortunate injuries that have certainly contributed to them slipping down the standings the way they have the past few weeks. But the way they play in these 2 games this week could determine whether they stay in the top 6 and lock themselves into a playoff series in the first round, or if they are going to be in that play-in tournament fighting for their lives against a Nets team in that first game that obviously no one is going to want to play. And finally, we have to talk about the refs. Now, everybody's talking about the rest of the NCAA tournament games. We're going to set the whole NCAA tournament aside. I don't want anybody to get mad at me about my thoughts on college basketball or the NCAA tournament, though it is always full of drama and has been fun to watch these games over the past few days. But at the beginning of the season, the NBA officials were lauded for the way they were calling games. They were getting rid of these non-shooting fouls that were being turned into shooting fouls, and people were happy with the way the game was being played and the way it was being officiated. Well, that has completely gone away. Fouls are up to sky-high levels again, tons of free throws, tons of stoppages, and the points of emphasis from the beginning of the season have definitely faded away. And that's something to watch over the next few weeks to see if that corrects itself, either between now and the end of the regular season or in the playoffs. But it's certainly not, the game is not being called or played like it was the first month of the season. And I think that's a bad thing. I really like the way the game was being played early in the season. Guys were, there was less complaining for calls because guys knew they weren't going to get them. And I just thought the pace of games was better. That has all gone away, as I said before. And we'll see what happens over the next few weeks, the next few months. But I think it's disappointing that the league was not able to stick to that. And I think it's hurt play as a result. But that'll do it for this week's edition of the NBA Stock Report. Hope you enjoy what should be a fascinating week in the association. We've got the playoff races in both conferences at full fever pitch. We'll see what happens if the Lakers can hang on to 10th. They're now in 10th now. The teams behind them are certainly not trying to win. But tons of jockeying for position all up and down. The East and West standings now really bunched up. Every game matters for these teams trying to fight for position. Should be a lot of fun to watch. And we'll check back in with you again next week.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus right now.